So, fantasy. How do we feel about the genre? If I were to be just completely honest, I think that my bias against it is due to a lack of general exposure to many fantasy books as an adult. As a kid, very familiar with the Harry Potters, the Hunger Games, the Chronicles of Narnia, right? And so, knowing the popularity of those stories and watching the movies as a kid, as an adult, I kind of feel like they have stayed within my childhood. So it makes me subconsciously kind of think like, oh, fantasy is equivalent to children's stories. And it's not. And I know it's not. Also, because I did give a very popular fantasy book a try, and it did disappoint me thoroughly. Sorry, I'm sorry. And it just kind of left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. But that all stops right now. Because I'm going to give fantasy a proper chance by reading 3 different fantasy books that all have different subgenres from the fantasy genre. The first book is going to be Babel by R.F. Kuang, which is historical fiction. Then The Giver, which is dystopian. And then The Poppy Fields, which is magical realism. Before we get into them, there are a couple things that I look for in a book. Well, the things I like in books are if a book is thrilling, if it has social commentary that is explicit, introspection, humor, and grief. Oh my god, make me laugh and then make me cry. They're not necessary, but they are appreciated. Let's give it a chance and see what we can find. Will I come out of this video with a higher opinion of fantasy than I started with? Is it Babel or Babel? It's not Babel. It's Babel. This is one of those books that was like impossible to find. Then I put a hold on Libby, and it was like, by the way, you're gonna wait several months for this to become available if you didn't know. I don't know why my neighbors all of a sudden, for months, we've gotten no word from them. They just want to act up right now. Anyway, and so I was like, okay, I'll just go with Hoopla. And then Libby all of a sudden is like, by the way, Babel is available. And I was like, what the heck? So we have Babel. I have a new little trusty toy. This is a timer. We're gonna call it Ms. Timely. Is gonna keep track of time for me. I'm just gonna let it go. Okay, I realize I didn't hit on like maybe some common confusion. If I'm reading an audiobook, why do I need to keep track of the time if it's already doing that? I am a really bad reader when it comes to time management. I will take a 15-minute TikTok scroll break. So this is just for me. She's just trying to keep me accountable, and that's why she's hired. I know nothing about Babel other than it is a fantasy about magical dark arts, and it's a school, right? Oh, and it's long. 22 hours. Wow. Babel is not what I expected. I don't know what I expected. I think I expected to be dropped into a school for magical, mystical people and not rudely awakened by the unfortunate situation that Robin finds himself in by being colonized, by being completely taken over for English benefit, kind of as a project. Oh my god. But it's so fascinating. This is the amount of time we spent in here. I'm like an hour and 15 in. I'm catching up with my little embroidery project, so we'll see what the heck I can embroider. Maybe I'll finish this whole entire thing, and then maybe I'll start a new project. Who knows? I have 20 whole hours. But so far, I'm very fascinated and I'm very into it. I feel like this is perfect for me. So, overall synopsis. Please forgive me if I butcher this, just warning you ahead of time. There's some things that I've missed, but overall synopsis. This is about a boy who's born in Canton. Robin Swift was not born Robin Swift because he basically was kind of orphaned due to the fact that disease took out the place where he lived. Was taken under the wing of this evil professor. He's an evil professor in my perspective. This evil professor, Professor Lovell, who may or may not be the boy, took him under as a ward, not even like as a child, and kind of forced him into this program, well, forced him into studying to be a master like translator so that he could go to Oxford. And then once in this boy's dream has been to go to Oxford because it's been instilled by Professor Lovell, like, you know, I took you from this horrible place and you are going to be molded into this Oxford boy. So that's been this boy's dream. He gets into Oxford, he gets into the translation program, he has a solid group of like naturally diverse people. You know, I feel like with books it's kind of hard because the goal is diversity to showcase different places, but I feel like this is one of the most natural ways that diversity has been showcased because all these other translators come from different places. We have a French woman who I think who is a black person, and I think she's of Haitian ethnicity, but she's French. And then there's Rami, who is Indian, and he makes me want to cry. So there are these different students from different nationalities, French, Indian, him, Cantonese, and then this other woman. It's just very fascinating because they're all studying languages. And R.F. Kuang, I don't know much about her. I don't know if like she's multilingual, but the way this book is written, she seems to be an expert on all things linguistics because, you know, this is centered on them being in a translation program in Oxford, with different magical themes and things. But I don't know how to explain it, but if you know, you know, like the things that are being like dropped in here about how it's hard for them sometimes to translate certain things because certain things in German means certain things in English and certain things in English, like she just drops so many of those random things and you're like, how many languages do you speak? Holy cow. Because you have to be a little bit well versed to write this well, and it's really blowing my mind. Anyway, this is great, so I'm gonna keep listening. Something that I really have underappreciated about fantasy is the aspect of the social commentary, especially as I'm realizing the through lines of what makes a fantasy story. What I'm noticing is that in most stories that I've either watched in a movie or in a show or in these books that I'm reading right now, are that majority of them have themes of suffering, and then the solution is the release of that suffering, and it'll either be on a large scale, like a societal scale, oppressor versus the oppressed, or an individual scale where the person has to come to terms with the suffering that they're dealing with and then figure out the ethics of coming to healing, and then we'll have to do that on like a large societal scale. It's something that I am now appreciating about fantasy that I did not realize before. Okay, so it's been a couple days since I gave any sort of an update. I am nearly 4 hours out from finishing the book. It's been really, really crazy. If you've read the book, then you know that like a couple very prominent events happen that kind of sparked the revolution. I'm kind of just at where, what's his name? Robin did that thing that he did not expect to do, and everything is just kind of going crazy, and people are dying. And it's like, oh God, oh no, I'm starting to cry, I'm starting to feel things, and I'm very curious as to how the heck this is going to turn around and how this is going to end. I have no idea, no predictions. It's really insane. My head is reeling, like for real.
Close. Sense reasoning with Matt Benedict. Safe travels. Robin whispered.
At the end, they're like, we really hope that you enjoyed this publication of HarperCollins whatever by R.F. Kuang. And I'm like, you. I'm broken. I can't process anything but this story that devastated me emotionally. Why would you do that to me? Why would you do that to me? I feel like I need to just nap. All jokes aside, I think I throw around the word phenomenal a little too much, but that just to me felt like the definition of a masterpiece. The last popular fantasy book that I read was like not even like an 18th as good as this. Oh my God. Also, I added on a little watermelon. Okay, Babel. My God. Also, we are trying some creative looks. I'm trying to match makeup looks to my book reviews. It is going to be a little rough in the beginning because I have little to no skill. As the year goes on, the book reviews and the looks will get better. Bear with me. Babel really does embody the question of what does it take to start, get involved in, and hopefully win a revolution. The book, of course, has Robin Swift, who is, from what we know, to be a mixed race Cantonese and white person who grew up in Canton. There are some things that unfold at Oxford that force him into thinking about how he wants to stay within the benefits of the system that he's in, or if he would like to revolt against that system because he learns about the harms that that system upholds. Robin himself is the perfect, nuanced character to handle these questions. Himself being somebody who at times could be white passing, himself being somebody who is naive, but then also starts off very grateful. One of the things that Professor Lovell says during a scene where something very horrible happens to him is that he doesn't cry. And that's what you want out of somebody that is going to uphold harmful institutions. You want somebody who won't express hurt, somebody who will not tell on you. He has enough of the white passing, the educated background, the privilege to stay within the system and to really like hold on to those systems. But then he also has enough background of somebody who lost their mother due to disease and that the mother could have potentially been saved. Parts of him that are identifying with the oppressor and then also the oppressed. Even as an adoptee, if I say anything about the negative impacts that adoption has had on me, people are not willing to hear it. And there are a lot of themes in this book that I feel like even speak to that. It's the idea that be grateful for the system that you benefit for and never speak on the things that make things hard for you. The most important conversation, which is in the title, I think it's called Babel, or the necessity of violence. The idea of violence being necessary in a revolution is something that I watched in R.F. Kuang's interview. I'll link below the interview because it was phenomenal. I'm really just in awe of the way that the woman speaks. Oh my God. Something in the book that was mentioned was as it related to a revolution. Robin is talking about how violence is necessary. And I'll read this specific quote. Violence is the only language they understand. Their system of extraction is inherently violent. Violence shocks the system, and the system cannot survive the shock. In Revolution, Robin did initially start off with bargaining and thinking of how many ways has the system helped me? How many ways is my life great because of the system? So then he ignores the violence that is happening to other people and the way that it's being harmed until he can no longer do that. And then as he comprehends that, other people around are kind of bringing up the same things that he was thinking about. And I think even in 2026, what makes this book to me have to be a 5-star is the fact that it reigns so prevalent to what is happening in this day and age. And I ultimately am just so happy that this has the respect that it has. Like truly. So that's how I felt about Babel. Ladies and gentlemen, we are up. It is 6:45 or something in the morning. Here we are with our book. Don't really know much about this book other than it's like a if you could erase your grief of the people that you loved, would you type Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind type situation? Let's get into it and see. I'll give you thoughts after, I suppose.
Okay, so The Poppy Fields by Nikki Ehrlich. The Poppy Fields essentially is an institution that is focused on providing relief to those who are grieving by giving them 1 month's worth of kind of a medically induced rest, nap, coma. Basically, you're out for a month supported by this institution that provides you the bed and then all of the assistance needed for you to stay asleep for a month. It's a very controversial experiment, but it's incredibly successful because they get thousands of applicants. The story follows 3 main people, Sasha, Ava, and Ray, who are all on very different paths of grief. Sasha is grieving a past fiance. Ava, I don't want to reveal too much, but she's kind of dealing with an estrangement, but then also she lost her grandma. And then Ray is dealing with a sibling loss. So they're all going to the fields for very different reasons. Not all of them are going to go into the rest, nap, coma. Some of them are going simply to speak up against it. So it all reveals the different journeys of grief that they're going through, but they're going through it together. They kind of do come together in a very accidental way, but in a way that does bring community. And we also hear from the founder of the poppy fields, and throughout the book you get to know her motivation for starting the poppy fields, how she feels about the controversial aspect of the poppy fields, because there's a lot of backlash to people going into the poppy fields, and all about the story.
Oh, hello. Okay. This book, I feel like, had such a strong emphasis, and kind of the center point of the book was focus on the ethics of grief and healing from grief. I feel like this exposed me to thinking about the many different sides of grief. The first one being, one thing that was very interesting that stood out to me was the different relationships you can have to people that you're grieving. There wasn't like a requirement as to you have to have like a family member or a close friend. Somebody went in because they were grieving somebody they lost on the job. And there was even judgment from the people around him because it was like, you're grieving somebody that you don't even know. Grief is very interesting because it is very specific to the individual. And like a snowflake, no two grief journeys are alike, I guess. The different interpersonal relationships are like, it could be a brother, a parent, a traumatic incident that you saw, a spouse, a friend. It could even be like just an estrangement. It could be somebody cheating on you. They pretty much run the gamut as to like what they consider you to be grieving, even though it's not just like a death. Death is for the most part, what people are coming in for, but it could be anything. This book also did a really good job of highlighting the different journeys that we all go on with grief. This starts off because three different strangers kind of met and convened to go to the poppy fields, all for very different reasons. And it kind of shows the power of when you were meant to be isolated but coming together accidentally in community, the healing power of that. And then the last one is the worrying about judgment about your own grieving process. The whole reason why this is a controversial idea is because there are people who would participate in it and people who wouldn't. I give this book a 3-star, which is good ultimately. A 3-star in my head, if we're going to relate it to like restaurants, is like fast food. Fast food is always good, but I felt like I was missing a little bit of that value, a little bit of like the depth that I mean, it is a book about grief and loss and death, but still to me, I felt like I didn't really, although I knew these characters at their lowest moments and their most deepest, darkest thoughts, I really still feel like there was something lacking in my connection to how I related to the people. The concept itself was so strong, but I think the writing and the like emphasis on emotion was missing a little. Like, I didn't think to cry one time, and this is a book about like death and loss. But like I said, the concept was very strong. So I honestly wish this book and like a grief observed by C.S. Lewis could be like married into like a new book that could really get me. Because I like this concept so much, but I like C.S. Lewis's writing so much as well. Yeah, I'm giving this book a 3. I recommend checking it out. I think it was very interesting, especially if you are interested in grief. This is going to be for you. Next, I'm going to get into The Giver. Before we even begin, the look is very much inspired by his first time seeing the color red. I just have to say, this is intimidating to review because I can't say anything new that hasn't been said before about this absolute classic. Like, oh yeah, I give this a 5-star. Yeah, so does every other high school English class. Are you kidding? That being said, I have to do it anyway. I have my trusty little assistant here with me. Say hi, assistant. That's my cat, Artemis. This world is built off the question, how far can we go to remove human suffering? And their society really took it there. This is a society built off of uniformity and has removed history, any sort of pain, as well as any sort of joy, so that there can't be a spectrum of different feelings. These are people who are feelingless, historyless, aka educationless. Everything is very much the same. Along with this removal of information, feelings, history, it is given to one trusty person in a society that is held in such high regard and then passed down from generation to generation. The person that has been given this duty in this book is called Jonas. Jonas is not a 12-year-old. He technically is what's called a level 12 because in the society you don't even have your own birthday. You graduate from one level to another with everybody else who is whichever level you are. This really goes in depth in exploring how Jonas processes the knowledge that is given to him from the person that had it before. He's able to receive this knowledge through the memory that the giver has, and it's been passed on and on and on. One of the very first things that he received was the knowledge of color. He sees something that's red, he sees hair that's red, and the giver tells him essentially that's color. Can you imagine not having the knowledge of the rainbow? That is also a moment that nearly made me cry when the giver gave him the rainbow. It's touching to imagine how priceless that could be. Another experience that he's given is a feeling of joy when you're sledding in the snow. I feel like that is like a foundational piece of anybody who's ever been in the snow, is experiencing that joy. It's like a universal feeling of when you're sledding. He starts off receiving all of these joyful, nice things that make him feel happiness, and even gets exposed to the idea of love. Along with that, he is shown the experience of pain. And one of the things that also made me almost cry was the idea that he was looking at his siblings who have never felt pain before. He feels pain, and then he gets introduced to things like war as well, and that's something that plays in his mind again and again because, of course, I really enjoy classics because they really laid the foundation for the most crucial, at times painful, and ultimately like philosophical questions that we need to be asking each other. However, as much as I enjoy that sentiment about reading, also my hesitancy towards classics as a black woman specifically black woman immigrant, is because I can't fully lean into it and accept it like wholly as a whole because I have so many more questions. One of the things that was mentioned in this book was one of the themes of this book is the uniformity piece and about how everyone is the same and everyone is one color. And so the default is to assume that everyone is white in the society, of course, and they also kind of allude to having red undertones. But my mind goes to, okay, so if everyone is uniform, are there other societies that are segregated that are also uniform? Or were they genocided? Like, what happens to all of the individuality as it relates to the array of ethnicities? I feel like contemporary does a better job of leaning into the nuance that typically gets explored a little bit better. So, how I feel about fantasy now. I am a lot more open to the fantasy genre right now because I've come to realize that fantasy typically asks these couple of questions. Is violence and suffering necessary? That's what Babel had brought up, and that is also something that I see in all of the other books. How necessary is suffering? Also, how do oppressors gain power? We typically see that from like start to the end of any book. And then with the whole magical element, typically, how can we use our powers that we are given? I think fantasy is especially important for children because they need to be asking themselves those specific questions. So I'd recommend pick up a fantasy book if you are, like me, hesitant to seeing what you can find and learn from my experience because I found a lot. Right now, if you're watching this within a couple of days of me posting this video, I'm currently in wisdom tooth removal surgery or recovery. Please give me support because it's like all my teeth are impacted. I'm going through a hard time. Um, I also am going to be posting a video documenting my time with wisdom tooth surgery and how much I'm going to be able to read. We'll see what the heck I can do. And I appreciate you so much. My last video was my most viewed video on this channel, and I love the interaction that people have with videos like that. And I also just appreciate anybody that will give a like or a comment or share or whatever the heck, because what I'm doing is like impactful enough to have attention on it, and your attention is so incredibly valuable and so appreciated. So I'm honored that you would spend this time with me, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever time of day it is. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, or night.